Okay, good morning, everybody. Good morning to the live people here. Thanks for joining this Polyphonic Performance Spaces Festival. This is the very first day of the festival, which is gonna be during the coming days also. You can check the program online. And today, we start with the presentation of myself, Luca Piovesan, and Loridian, which is a composer. And the project we are introducing, it's about a piece we have been working in the last, let's say 6 months, probably, something like that, and which is part of both our academic research. We are gonna tell you a little bit more about this. And so maybe Martin can start with a little introduction on his topic of research.
Yes, well, thank you everybody and watching online and here today. So as Luca said, this new piece on which we collaborated is a fruit of a collaboration that has lasted probably 6 months. We are here today to describe a bit our process, our approaches, and how our two PhD researchers interact in that context. So I will briefly say a few words on my own research, and Luca will do the same for his research. So I am currently a PhD candidate at the University of Leeds in the United Kingdom. My research is an investigation into breath as a composition material. So the connection with the accordion is obvious since the accordion looks like a step that has to be done in the frame of this research on breath. So my research PhD aims to build and describe a complete composition system that takes air and breath as physical and acoustic materials. I should say a few words on my understanding of breath before going into details. My approach to breath is the one understood under the French definition of souffle, which is an equivalent, but not an exact equivalent to breath, and this is where the subtlety of the research is stemming from. Souffle tends to refer to a whole category, a very large category of sounds that can range from the human breath to the instrumental air until the machinic or electronic forms of white noise. So we have a triple continuum between the human, the instrument, and the electronic form of white noise, or the machinic form of white noise, which are key for me to building a system in terms of sound, in terms of structure, in terms of communicating states between all those shapes of air that are not limited or complete to each other, but that can interact and build a system in terms of orchestration, sound organization, etc., etc. So to briefly end this presentation, I should say that for me, this approach to an overarching element, namely souffle, air and breath, is for me also a tool and a lens through which I tend to analyze my own music and the current music, and the post-Second War music, in the sense that I feel that we today are in the search for paradigm or for new ways to understand the recent evolution of today's composition, in which unpitched elements, timbre details, or noise need in a way a further definition or perhaps a new understanding that I believe souffle can offer. So I will go more into details about this research later, but maybe I can now let Luca introduce his own research.
Yep, and I'm a PhD candidate here at the Conservatorium of Brussel and VUB University. And just a technical thing, which might be interesting for you, at the end of the presentation, we will reserve 15 minutes from 9:45 to 10 for question and answer. So if there will be something about the technical part of it that is arising, some questions or curiosity on you, we are happy to. And it's also the beautiful part of having people live, masked, but live. And I don't know if people online have the possibility to type questions. This I really don't know. In case, okay. And so my research is about co-composition in the way that basically I've been working for several years now with composers on producing new repertoire for accordion. Since I play an instrument which is quite new to the musical scene, it's quite recent, I really have been pushing on the creation of new repertoire. And this gave me the possibility to collaborate with really interesting musicians and composers. And every time I've been discovering new aspects of my instrument, and which was probably the most interesting part for me. So it's really a beautiful exchange. And the exchange went to a level that I'm thinking of the very initial, especially, contact between the composer and the performer as an act of co-composition, because I play an instrument which is kind of obscure in terms of workings. It's really not main, let's say, or main instrument like piano or violin or wind instrument. And so composer had to struggle at the beginning to understand the mechanics of it, because it's a keyboard instrument, but it's wind controlled. And the combination of the two, it's really sometimes unpredictable. And it's also a very physical instrument. So this led me to a lot of reflection on how this collaboration starts and then develops. And one part that has been really interesting to me in this process is when it becomes a real co-composition. So to the point that what is really a structural part of music nowadays, which is the sound creation, so not only the form of the piece, which I still continue to think as something more specific from the composer side, but the creation of the sound itself in terms of timbre, in terms of vibration, in terms of also body engagement in the production of the sound, that part I think it's really a part where we can work together. And so I wanted to challenge this moment, and I say, okay, I play an instrument which I really am in touch with, and the composer has no idea, much or less, of how it works. So I'm gonna make it even more obscure by adding some layers of pedal boards. So these are guitar effects and guitar pedal boards. I'm using a multi-effect. I'm using a delay, which I control with the hand. Everything goes through 2 microphones, 1 mixer, and then it enters the system. And I have 2 expression pedal in order to control some parameters. I'm gonna explain more in detail in a while. So at this point, I'm using an instrument which is really not famous or not known enough, which is filtered by something which is even more obscure. And so this way, basically, it's in a funny way, the composer has no idea of my output. And this is what I'm really interested in. It's like really working together in order to say, okay, we need to build this, let's try to experiment. But still, the discover of the sound, it's really an important part of my production of the sound. So when I started working with Martin, I had a few sound that I was experiencing in the last year, mainly, and I proposed them to him. Then we started working together, we started refining we started experiencing, we started trying to do some weird stuff, you will see it in a while, and then we started to filter all of this material, which is really a lot of material, and we'll show you also the process. It's off now. Yeah. The process of the creation of this material, and up to the point of selecting some material, and then the form part. So to give a shape to the material, that was of course his task. And at the end, this co-composition process ended up in a partiture, in a score, which is much or less traditional in terms of exchange between the composer and myself. But you will see the graphic of the score. It's really, I don't know the adjective for it. I don't know if you can have it on the screen. It's off. It's really something that we need some explanation of it, and it's really tailored to the setup I'm using.
I think we can get into the details of the score and notation later, but I do agree with Luca in the sense that for me as a composer, it was perhaps the first time I composed a piece without having any physical contact with the instrument, the accordion, and also no contact or almost no contact with the setup, which is something I don't usually do. I think the only cases of rare instruments, the accordion is probably one of the extreme cases, maybe with harp. for composers, we can very rarely access to those instruments. And we have to rely, which is what Luca is aiming at, we have to rely on a collaboration and to some extent on the level of confusion and obfuscation that is created through this that can be used then as a catalyzer for a new type of creation. So that was very interesting. The process was made with, we met several times. I recorded every session we did. I selected the material afterwards and while we were working. And I think, as you say, the role of the yeah, no, it's just have to click on the
no, we need a password. I don't know.
You don't need password. Just click on the thing in the middle.
Ah, okay, on the media monster.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, we see the score now. So, just to say that I think in that context the composer is. Oh, Luca has shown me many types of materials. He knew my research on breath and air, so of course he showed me many materials in relationship with that. And there are many things we can do, as you will see. But I think the composer, besides having the role of creating the form, organizing those materials into a wider shape, also have the role and the intention to say, okay, let's go further into that. Instead of just having this sound, let's dig into that, let's add some more things. So I think the process can be very well summed up as this. Luca showed me something, and I say, okay, let's dig into that, and let's add this. Let's spend 1 hour on this sound and see what we can do with this sound. And I think this is how we arrive at the end, at the final material we are using and that we have been organizing in the score that we are seeing now.
And some sounds were even like randomly born. Like I had a few effects on the pedal boards, and by mistake I touched the microphone, and we discovered that sound was really interesting. So we say, oh wait, maybe we can work on it, and you will hear it becomes a big central part of the piece.
Because I think you have how many 4,000 effects or
on this one, it's hundreds.
Many combinations. So to some extent we combine 9, 10, 11 or more effects at the same time. So we have a wide range of possibilities, and sometimes we just discover the thing, and by calculating or by chance or by having an instinct that maybe this direction could be interesting to explore. So,
so maybe to be more concrete also and giving you the possibility to hear something, maybe we can go through the first line of the piece and explain a few things that then will appear during the piece. And you might see on the score at the beginning we have an X, typical notation for percussion, on the microphone. So the very initial gesture of the piece, it's a combination of 2 reverbs, and there's a whammy. You hear also my voice processed by it, and it's a tap on the microphone. This is the very first gesture. Then we have 2 different taps of the microphone. We discovered that changing on the position where I touch the capsule of this microphone, the sound is different. So it's like this. And there it's a combination with the air. So being the research of Martin based on the soufflet, or soufflet for the accordion, or the souffle in general, we really dig into the air sound of the accordion and the combination of air, filtering the air through the effects, and my air produced by my body, which means my respiration. So it's a combination of, and all of the sounds of the instrument, like this one, which might in a way resemble a sound of a breathing. And so right below the fermata, on the bellows, this is the scraping. And while the second line, with the T on it, it's a work on the tremolo. Briefly going to show you. So it's a change of the speed of the tremolo on the air, which gives some different pulsation. And on top of this, with my hands, I'm controlling the volume input, because depending on the sounds I'm producing, it's really changing. So from the hitting the microphone to play the air, the volume of the input, it's really different. It's extreme. So I constantly have to play on the main mix output of my microphones, which then enters the pedals. And so this is a few of the effects. So I can play maybe the first line.
Maybe I wish say a phrase.
Yep,
you can
go
play
ahead.
the first line, but a brief word on the piece. As Luca said very well, the piece, the name of the piece is Tracer le souffle. And I think it really sums up very well what the piece is doing, in the sense that we will be exploring the traces of breath. And all those traces, which are obtained by reverberation, by effects, also by loop effects, like we will see, create a form of fusion or confusion with the actual sounds of air. And in a way, reverberation and resonance and air tend to become one word thing, one word element, in which it's not always possible to say what is what. To this is added the voice of the performer. The microphones, as you will see, are really used as full instruments. And sometimes even the accordion, as you will see later, is an extension of the microphone, instead of the microphone being an extension of the accordion. So
yeah, funny note on this is that basically I'm using, I guess, 4 notes of the instrument. All of the rest is processing of air, percussion, pedals. I will only use a low cluster and a super high cluster, and that's it.
I should say that the accordion as an instrument is quite unique for me, in the sense that the various forms of air and air sounds, the physical air of the accordion, the one of the performer obviously, the one of the microphone that we can scrape and even blow on, the one of the accordion that we can touch. It's an elastic body that we can touch, scrape, rub, to obtain many, many colors, actually, of air-like sound that also merge with the other elements. Yeah. So we have a multiple ambiguity that is reworked through the effects that I was very much interested in for this piece. I think this is the basis for the composition. So probably, yes, now maybe we can show a bit.
I wonder whether to play the beginning or the whole. I would just do the first line and then we'll say a few more things. More than 50% of
all the material
of the piece.
We are creating traces. The traces of air are certainly reworked by the whammy, while the air of the accordion is coming out, plus the friction gesture, which is participating. So we have already 3 layers: resonance, and for friction, and air.
Yeah, and for these traces, I'm using I see a lot of guitar players here. So for the traces, I'm using 2 reverbs combined, which are quite different. So one has a very long decay and a super short pre-delay. If I play a note. And the second one is the exact opposite. It's almost a slap back pre-delay. It gives more body to it. And the combination of them is this one. Both the presence and that. I sometimes hear the sound of the accordion a little bit delayed in the room. I don't understand what is this. Okay, it's a bit weird. And the second thing we are using to modulate the trace, so it's tracer le souffle, but also to work on the traces. So once I create a trace, I act on the trace. These are the modification of the sound I use at the beginning of the piece. Then on my pedal board, on the foot pedal board, I also have a looper, which we'll use to create some layering of air sounds and then to dialogue with the played part of it, so we will overdub a few materials. I have these two reverbs I just introduced you. I have two whammy, two different ones. So one is a shorter range whammy. It's basically a triton up and a triton down. And the second whammy is almost 2 octaves up and 2 octaves down in order to be able to really expand these traces. And the first effect on my pedalboard is it's a tremolo, which I will use for the air to imitate in a way this, like we call it the parlando section, the talking section, because it's the idea like of an old guy which does. So the idea is something like this. So this is another thematic material of the piece. And on top of this, I'm using a delay looper, which I will use both as a delay and a looper at the end of the piece. And I control it with my hand because I love the idea of intervening with the parameters of the delay. And of course, being the accordion very big and heavy, I couldn't operate on it if it was on the ground. So I use it on my hand. And I will start using it as a tape delay to create this kind of works on the traces. So to always on the idea of working on what's left of the sound.
Yeah. So I think maybe before we can show a part of the piece, I should say a last word on the approach that has been my approach as a composer in terms of all this setup, because actually I think all the parts of the body, the hands, the feet, are doing something. So I have tried to include it, to integrate it in a gesture continuum, in the sense that we are always, even the pedal changes, the clicks are at some point clearly written in terms of rhythm. I have also tried to imagine, because it's very complicated to have all the parameters to do playing on the microphones, the accordion, changing with the hand, the delay, with the feet, the multiple pedals, 2 expression pedal and a pedal board, which is quite a lot. So a part of the work also has been to create a kind of choreography on this. So a gesture of friction then goes to a hand delay, which goes back to the air of the accordion. All of this is part of our collaboration as well, to try to find easy ways, natural ways, in this complexity of, in this multiplicity of sounds and gestures. Yeah,
and to me also, on the funny part of it, it was, I don't think there's too many accordion players which use a pedal boards. I pretty much, I have an idea I can be the only one at the moment, but I guess there's more around the world. And it was funny to discover that, for example, with some combination of foots, I just fall because I'm losing the support of my legs. So some combinations are really impossible, and we had a lot of exchanges when I say, no, this is not possible because I fall, or this is not possible because I'm doing this, or it's very funny on the explorative part of it. Yeah, so now I will play through the first, the piece is going to be built in 3 sections. Today we'll play 2 of them. And so the first part is on the exploration of these traces, percussion, and breathing sounds in the combination of scraping, breathing, and air of the instrument. So I will play through this first section now. And then there's we will introduce and play the second section, which is more a percussive section on the microphones. And then we will listen to your questions.
Great, thank you. Thank you. So it was the first section of the piece, Tracer le souffle. And as you heard, of course, the traces are multiple. They come from the reverberation, as we said, but also from, I think we can say a few words maybe on the loops we create. Yep. Because, of course, each performance of the piece or of the section creates a different loop. The loops are created while the piece is being played. So the material that Luca is utilizing creates each time a different loop that we reuse after in the work. The ending section was the fading out of the loop that was created previously on two overdubbing sections that grow it progressively. It is then reused afterward in the piece, and we will build also a second loop with the hand delay, which can also act as a looper. Yep. And at the end of the piece, those two loops are put in perspective, creating echoes. And the only traces that finally remain are the one of the electronics, and let's say the memories of the piece that we take progressively as the piece moves on. Yeah. So
maybe we can talk a bit about the coming section, which is a percussive part. So we discovered this peculiarity of microphone tapping filtered by two whammies plus a reverb. The way we can sing with it. And so it was all about finding some, sorry, my voice is weird. It was always about finding a balance between the instruments, so the instrument sounds, and we explored some parallel between the accordion playing and the tapping. And on the other side, it was really a matter of how to work on the microphones, because the accordion, I think it's a peculiarity only of the accordion to change its size while we play it. If you think of a violin or a guitar or a piano, the instrument stays the same, it stays there. While I play accordion, it goes from like being 45 centimeters to 1 meter and 20. So of course, when I'm open, I have no way to tap on these microphones. So we had to study, and especially Martin had to study, a configuration of the piece in order to me to give the possibility to play the accordion, but always to be here when I needed to work on the microphones. Yeah, the trombone, bravo. That's a good one. Yeah, trombone. And maybe what is the musette? What is the English for it? The horn, the pipe. But it's a different principle. And so it was really a physical exploring of the piece on one side. On the other part, we really wanted to keep this part a bit open for improvisation. Because being so physical, we both agreed on the fact that having too much structure and details in the piece, I mean, the structure is clearly there, but to have too much details in a way gives you less freedom and less ease when you are performing such a physical part of the piece. Maybe you can tell something more here.
Say, I will show the score now.
Yeah. And so the sounds we will use for this one are the tapping on the microphones filtered by the two whammies, mainly, and the reverb also. And then we went discovering all the possible percussion on the accordion. So kicking on the keys, this one, scraping on the keys, this way and this way. Maybe you can see them, so it's not very clear, but so the last line is percussion, is this one, and then there's the guero on the last line, and yes. The lines you see that goes up and down are the singing of the whammy. And other percussive sound we came out with is, of course, the hitting the instrument while playing on both hands. So maybe, Martin, you can show the following page. And where you see some very traditional clusters. This one. Which in a way try to imitate the sound of the whammies and the microphones. And I think this is, and the blowing on the microphones. This also was, it was a mistake at the beginning, and so we discovered that it's a quite interesting percussive sound, and we can also use it for working on the traces.
And it's especially interesting when mixed with low register clusters, because in a way it completes the register. I don't know if you
gives a very dense texture of the piece. And the very last sound we will work on is this one. It's scraping of the microphones. And I think the interesting part of the accordion is being a stereo instrument, so I love to have it panned on the two speakers so we can work on these, or have a dialogue between the two with different materials. And we also take care of this while we record the loops. So the loops will be working also on the stereo part of the instrument.
Yes, and in the last section of in the last phase of this section that we will show shortly, a double loop is being taken from the accordion. So one loop is taken with the hand delay and the other one with the foot. And there is a dialogue that is slowly emerging at the end of the section we will show now between those two loops. One is more taken from the microphone scraping that you just heard, a continuous sound with a specific quality, and the other one is taken from the instrument itself. So we have really this double dialogue to which the breath of Luca, the breath of the performer, is added, inhalation and exhalation. So we will end up by working on those three layers, the human one and the double memory or loop one, you can say.
So I will go through this section, and then if you have any questions, we are happy to address them. Any questions? Curiosity?
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Fascinating. Did you discover the accordion as a spectacular interface? Really nice. Just one question regarding the score. Is it considered as just a memory device for you, or are you worrying about future transmission?
It's a good question.
Is it important at all? A question
it's a good question.
It looks quite like a traditional score.
Yeah.
From here, not involving all parameters that you control.
Yeah.
I can imagine adding all those layers will result in a complexity that's maybe not wanted.
Yeah. I can answer on my part, and maybe Martin has something more to add. So on my part, the study of the transmission of material between the two, it's part of the research. And at this moment, it's really at a very initial stage. So I want to even develop my tools in tools mainly of semiotic, which is part of my research, and to really understand what the role of the score becomes in this specific case. Because as you have seen, maybe we'll show you some transformation of the score from the very initial stage to the shape it is now. Yeah. So the way the score is written now, which is the one I have on my iPad here, which is the same you have there, it's really everything I play is written there, except from the free improv part, which is notated at that. The problem in terms of having other performers being able to perform it, it's first of tools, because it's some very specific tools you need to have. Setting on the tools, so I need to note those down, and then really working on the thing. I personally think that the way the piece is now, it's really hard for another accordion player to get into it. And to the point that myself, every time I change the PA and the room where I work, the piece is completely different. I mean, not completely, but some effects are really sounding different. Coming from the extension of the speakers, which reacts in a different way to my system, and the length of the reverberation is different. The volume I need to work on are completely different. Like these days, I've been working in different rooms of the conservatory, and every time it was a new discover. Some way frustrating, but I guess you as a guitar player, you know the issue. Yeah, it's actually a way I would love to dig into, which is to find a way to have an output which is stable. But the problem of this output, having microphones, is that it's really responsive to the room. And that is a nice thing because it's live, but it's also a problem under a performance point of view. And the risk of feedback is really always there. That's why my closest knob is the volume. Yeah. And I would love to have a pedal for the volume, but it's not possible this way because I need to control the input volume of the system. So I don't have a pedal for that. That would be great, actually, to have an input volume. Yeah.
I agree. I think my impression is that the score is perfectly doable by someone else. Granted, this is a setup, the technical setup is there. We agreed on a notation. I don't know if you see, for example, this page. It's a mix between indicated actions, let's say with lines and more or less graphic indications.
Action writing, yeah.
Action word, and I wanted also to keep a kind of conventional, traditional approach so that the score could be also maybe approached by other performers. But again, the challenge is not really in what the score can say. It says almost every detail. There are improvised parts which are also written on given materials, for example, or given lines and indications. The challenge is, as you said, how to react to a new setup, a new room, new PAs and everything. This is the real challenge, I think, of what we are doing.
I think, in a way, we can think of it as sound. And so the idea is, given that you have a different setup, just think of the sound and try to work on your setup to have that sound, which is something, I guess, that guitar players do.
Yeah, that would be probably interesting. I was thinking about the first Dufour pieces he wrote.
Yeah.
Specifying, with electronics, specifying the precise gear and the settings on the gear, which today...
Yeah, it sounds...
We don't know gear anymore. We cannot find back the user manual, so we are lost.
Yeah. So the idea is to record the piece.
We have a more generic.
Yeah, the idea is to record the piece. Yeah.
Yes.
And to record the piece.
That's just a
Yeah.
This material you have there will be not anymore in use in 10 years.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, and like I changed a few pedal boards, and like this is what I feel comfortable with now. After a couple of years of training with the pedals, I don't know what will happen in 2 years also, like in terms of pedal. I discovered these beautiful pedals, I guess you know them, and so it's also expensive gear in a way. I mean, so that's also that's also a problem. Yeah.
But maybe I can show a few
that
sketches
cool.
of the score. If I can reach the computer. Yes, I can. So this is the score as we heard it today. As you can see, most details are written actually. There are improvisation sections which are included in the piece, but I can show you some written sketches. For example, this is what I call a scenario, which I have first. This is one of the first versions of the score actually. It's only words and lines. We started from the basis from our exchanges, and I try to include it in I call it a scenario, in a type unfolding in which the elements are mixed. So I have indicated a few lines, a few crescendo, and everything.
Can you imagine my face the first time I saw this?
Can you cite with that? Oh yes, of course. And so this is one of the versions, but actually it's very precise in the sense that I can read it, of course, but nobody else, which is good.
More information.
It is.
But there is definitely more information in this version because writing a piece also with a software, with a clear standardization, is renouncing to something. It's something part of everyday life of a composer. Writing a definite version is putting some stuff on the side. This is why improvisation comes as a kind of response to this. It's a compromise. How to include improvisation in the writing, and how to magnify improvisation in the writing, and how improvisation can magnify the writing. It's a very tricky question. I have no response. We're trying to find some elements of answer this. But
and also even the idea of using the musical stuff with 5 lines, it might be debatable for this piece. You really don't need it.
You don't need it.
It's just that as a musician, sometimes you feel more comfortable to see those 5 lines. 10 actually, it's 2 hands. But the lines are really a matter of texture of the sound.
I think it's also psychological.
Yeah, to me it is. Yeah.
I was wondering, especially in the first section, if you had included, like in the rhythmical aspects of the expressions, the changes you do with your feet, the sounds, because in some moments when it's really soft, you really hear it very much.
Yep.
And I don't know if you have if you do it rhythmically, or if it's even included in the scores, or if it's supposed to create the
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to repeat the question I've been told for the streaming. So the question is if the pedal changes in terms of sound, of sonic aspect, are notated in the score. And the answer is yes.
Is yes and no. For example, in the very introduction, you can see I don't know if you see it clearly, but the very last measure of the first system is actually the writing of the pedal-clicks, which have 2 sounds, one when you push them and one when you read them.
Yeah.
And it is written. So the last part of the first system is. So it is rhythmically integrated in that sense here. In the wider section, when, for instance, we take loops based on the sounds, I tend to feel also that the pushing of the button that you need to overdub the loops tend to be a bit present, and it's a question we need to address in the next version.
It's also specific of this pedal board I'm using, but I guess it's to have a confirmation of the fact that it's acting. Because I guess that it would be totally physical possible to build a... I actually came from a MIDI interface, which was completely silent, but it has a huge amount of other problems with the accordion. Because it was really tailored for playing standing, and so having your weight acting on the soft key, probably. And so I just decided to go really analog and to have a real feedback of what I'm doing. So the click noise, it's annoying. So we say, okay, we have this noise, let's deal with it. But it's something that it's there. On the other side, as an accordion player, we always have this noise, like saxophone players, for example. So it's a clicking which is always there for every note we play. So for me, it's nothing new.
But of course, it's amplified.
Yeah.
There, it falls a bit out in the sonic space.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I like, for example, for the loop over recording, I realized that if I just press it very softly, it's a little little less noisy. If I do, it's more noisy. But yeah.
It's interesting to include it since it's
Yep. Since it's there. Yeah, I agree.
It's a hard question because it's not really part of the sonic exploration. It can be, at some point I have tried to mix it with a friction. So that's how the sound can merge. But it's a question for me, in the rhythmical section, they can be very well integrated if we think about really in the details of the writing, which has been done at some point in the score. It's not the final version, but probably we will try to include it a bit more in the final version.
Yep.
The question is when you overdub the loops in, let's say, more atmospheric sections. That is a real question.
Yeah, but this, as I said to Tom, it's going to be part of my theoretical research because I'm really interested on what will, I mean, being a co-composition, so what will be left as a trace. And also under a philosophical point of view, we always address the score to the name of the composer, for example. If you think of a track list of a CD, so what will happen there? It's another thing. And it will take time. And this is this collaboration with Martin. It's the first one of somewhere 4 to 6 I'm starting with other composers. And given the unfortunate period we are living in logistically, like these people live far, like Finland, Austria, Italy, and we just were very lucky because we live like 5 minutes walking from each other. So we say, okay, let's take advantage of the situation and start working together. Yeah.
So things are still possible.
Yeah.
So I think we will.
Yeah. Is there any other question or?
I have a very
Yeah.
small detail.
Yeah.
I was just not wondering about the notation. Like the front line and the second line, you have this oval shape in the normal system where it's half circle.
Yes.
I was wondering if it's something to do with your foot or.
It's the foot, yeah. So generally the lines on the bottom lines are the foot, the feet, and this is the speed of the tremolo. So I do, so the shape, yeah. So when it's round, it's arched, the idea is to be, when it's spiky, it's more. This pedal is working nice. I had a cheaper pedal which was really not doing the job. This I have the feeling I don't know from outside.
Yeah, it works well.
No, I was just trying to understand because at the end it's just like a circular.
Yeah, no, the pedal. So these pedals, they are named for people who doesn't play electric guitar or pedals. They are named expression pedals. So they control one parameter you assign to them. And for example, for the tremolo, the parameter is the speed of the tremolo. So when I'm on the 2, it's just super slow. When I'm full down, it's the fastest speed. So it goes from all the way up. So it's very precise. Yeah, and so it's just a rolling, and it's very comfortable for moving. This one, so this for me controls the speed of the tremolo and the whammies. So when I do the whammy, this I can play for you. So if I... And for the tremolo, this is it. This is what it does on the system. And while the other pedal, I'm using it as a volume of the looper, which is still there. So I can play with the hand looper and the foot looper. And I can dialogue between the two of them. And the nice thing is that I can overdub, which is what I've done at the end. I can overdub this looper, being first in the chain. I can overdub on my foot looper, so I can delete it, record another loop, and build several layers of stuff. Yeah, I guess as a piano player, you already have pedals to deal with.
There is...
Circle with what the foot is actually going down.
Yeah,
It's the reverse of the piano, actually.
yeah, actually, some of them, like the whammy, you're right, the whammy is the other way around. So when it goes down, it's the lowest, and when it goes up, it's the highest.
But actually, you have two ways to write the pedals, which we have used.
Yeah.
The first one is, let's say, the graphic way, the lines, and even the interrupted lines for the tremolo.
Yep.
And the first one, you can guess it on the first system of the page. It's having those two lines, like this, or like this, a bit like a crescendo that is going up and down. To say half open, for instance, or fully open or fully closed.
Yeah.
So this is the two notations we use for the pedals.
And as a keyboard player, I really, which was not used to the pedals, I really took a year to know what was going on to happen. It's just learning a new instrument, and very often I say, why is this sound coming out of it? And then you start to detect it. Yeah. Any last question, if you want, or I think we are running out of time.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks everybody
very
on,
much,
on the streaming also. And
thanks for the streaming.
bye. Thanks to the technicians. Yeah.